Tonight, pageantry and protests as politicians return to Parliament. Good evening and welcome to ABC News Victoria. I'm Tamara O'Dine. Also tonight, Australia among 28 countries demanding an immediate ceasefire and peace deal in Gaza. Fresh charges expected for alleged childcare pedophile Joshua Dale Brown. And Doc clocks off. An inspirational Blue calls time on his AFL career. The 48th Federal Parliament has officially opened more than 2 months after Labor's landslide election victory. Dozens of new MPs were sworn in as the government's commanding majority took shape in the lower house. But outside Parliament, the pomp and ceremony was disrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters.
An ancient tradition marking a modern milestone, welcoming the 48th Parliament, the most diverse in history.
It is a reminder as well of why we all belong here together, that we are stronger together.
The class of 2025 sworn in, bringing politicians of all shapes and sizes to the halls of power. The returning speaker dragged back to his seat. Not a protest, just a parliamentary tradition. Then the slow march between chambers, from the House to the Senate, for the Governor-General to lay out Labor's agenda.
The government will invest in building childcare centres and expanding high-quality not-for-profit services, making affordable care accessible for even more families.
While tradition played out inside Parliament, outside it was disrupted. Protesters halted the usual 19-gun salute as they called for stronger action on Gaza.
Sanction Israel now!
Their message echoed in the chamber by Green Senator Mehreen Faruqi, whose party now holds the sole balance of power in the Senate. A thumping election win on May 3 sees Labor's 94-strong majority stretching deep across the House of Representatives, next to a crossbench of 13 MPs and a depleted coalition with just 43 seats.
The coalition would have preferred a different result. That is the nature of democracy.
The new seating plan, a constant reminder to both the coalition and the Greens of the leaders they've lost. Ailey France, who unseated Peter Dutton, seated directly in Susan Lee's eyeline.
It took 7 years to climb. As a single mum with one leg, battling one of the most prolific politicians of our time.
Tomorrow it's down to business. Education Minister Jason Clare will introduce laws to reduce existing HECS debts by 20% and urgent legislation to improve safeguards in childcare. The Coalition has been briefed on those laws tonight and has indicated it wants to work collaboratively with the government to try and fix the sector. Tomorrow, the real politics begins. Olivia Casely, ABC News, Canberra.
While the first day of Parliament was largely ceremonial, a new political dynamic was also on show. Here's the ABC's national political lead, David Spears.
When MPs took their seats here today, three things stood out. The sheer scale of Labor's majority spilling across the chamber, the record number of women, and the stark reality confronting Susan Lee of a greatly reduced coalition presence. This new Parliament has also begun with a very different tone to where the last one ended. There's much talk of greater cooperation, and it looks like there will be some, initially at least, on lowering HECS debts and increasing childcare standards. But vows to be kinder and gentler never seem to last too long. Already today, both the Greens and the Coalition were at the government over its position on Israel and Gaza. And Susan Lee is suggesting it would be a broken promise if the government were to try to fix the budget by increasing the overall tax take. The Prime Minister, with his strength of numbers, is showing greater confidence in staring down his rivals. But at the same time, Labor can't afford to show too much hubris when Parliament gets down to business tomorrow.
The federal government has demanded an immediate end to the war in Gaza, joining with 27 other countries to condemn Israel's treatment of civilians. It comes as Israel expands its military campaign, pushing into parts of central Gaza for the first time.
The moment of impact. as Israel's hourly bombardment of Gaza continues. Fresh strikes across the occupied territory, including in Deir al-Balah in the centre of the Strip, which until now has been relatively untouched. Among the dead are children who'd sought safety in the area, fleeing southern Gaza only to be killed in a hail of bullets and shelling.
We were targeted by heavy gunfire from the occupation's vehicles, tanks and soldiers, directly and intensively.
Gaza's health authorities say the number of Palestinians killed has now passed 59,000 people. The mounting death toll and the humanitarian crisis gripping the Strip, prompting Australia to join with more than 24 other countries in calling for an immediate end to the war. The suffering of civilians in Gaza has reached new depths, the joint statement reads. We condemn the drip feeding of aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs of water and food. We call on the Israeli government to immediately lift restrictions on the flow of aid.
I think that statement reflects the real distress that so many Australians feel about what they're seeing in Gaza. They are concerned, distressed by the catastrophic humanitarian situation that we are seeing.
Of course, we want to see aid reach those who deserve it, but it is so important that Hamas, that has control often over the flow of that aid, but certainly over the ongoing, completely unacceptable detention of those hostages, act in the interests of the people of Gaza.
Hamas has welcomed the joint statement, while Israel slammed it, saying the crisis is Hamas's fault. The Israeli foreign minister arguing, if Hamas embraces you, you're in the wrong place. The US ambassador to Israel describing the joint statement as disgusting. Many will likely doubt how effective a shift in rhetoric will be, given it's done very little to force Israel to change course to this point. But it does show that fewer and fewer countries are willing to back Israel wholeheartedly. For the Palestinians on the ground and the families of Israeli hostages still without their loved ones, that will only matter once this war is brought to an end. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Australia's signing of the joint statement represents another escalation in the government's criticism of Israel. Here's Global Affairs editor Laura Tingle.
Public outrage around the globe as the Palestinian death toll climbed into the tens of thousands has been followed only slowly by official statements from governments reluctant to criticise Israel. The position of the United States as the only country with a real capacity to influence Israel, both through cutting aid and military hardware, has long allowed other nations to feel they could hide behind the US lack of action. But the new development in this terrible conflict, which has seen Israel close down the usual paths for humanitarian aid and replace them with a US Israeli-backed aid organisation of questionable merit, poses a more immediate and tangible point of pressure. The shocking daily tally of men, women and children killed while standing in line waiting for food and water has now seen this joint statement by 28 countries condemning Israel's actions. But how can Australia exert any real influence? Humanitarian groups want Australia to escalate its response. So far, the Albanese government has only escalated its rhetoric.
A former Melbourne childcare worker already facing scores of child sex offences is set to be hit with more charges. Joshua Dale Brown is accused of abusing 8 children at a centre in Melbourne's west. While the 26-year-old wasn't in court today, his lawyers argued to have information about his charges suppressed, and a warning this story contains some confronting details.
A legal obstacle. The lawyer for an alleged pedophile leaves court, his client facing the prospect of even more charges. Childcare worker Joshua Dale Brown is already accused of abusing 8 children, aged between 2 months and 5 years, here at Creative Garden Early Learning in Point Cook. Today, his lawyer urged the Melbourne Magistrates Court not to release the accused predator's charge sheets to the press, saying there will be more charges to come. But Magistrate Donna Bakos rejected the application, telling the court the charges were a matter of public record and she wasn't prepared to restrict access. This is the first time we've been able to explicitly see the allegations against Joshua Dale Brown. There are 73 charges, including 28 of producing child abuse material, 13 charges of sexually touching a child, 3 charges of sexual penetration of a child under 12, and food contamination. Mr Brown was arrested in May and has been in custody since then. Parents were notified 7 weeks later. During his career, Mr Brown worked at 24 childcare centres. The discovery of his alleged offending prompting a massive public health response, with authorities urging more than 2,000 children to be tested for sexually transmitted diseases. While the media application didn't go his way, lawyers for Joshua Dale Brown managed to convince a magistrate to delay his next court date. He was meant to reappear in September, but that's now been pushed back to February. Months away and more charges to come. Danny Tran, ABC News, Melbourne.
Secret briefing notes show that the Allen government has ignored some advice from police to make it tougher for accused arsonists to be released on bail amid Melbourne's ongoing tobacco wars. Documents obtained by the ABC reveal police asked the state to tighten bail rules around arson offences to help stem the tide of firebombings plaguing Melbourne. But the state government only removed the presumption of bail for one arson-related offence, which requires a person's life to be endangered. That change is unlikely to have an impact on the majority of tobacco-related firebombings, which typically occur in the dead of night at empty shops.
We'll continue to work with Victoria Police. We've got more bail reforms to come as we enter into the next session of Parliament, and we'll continue to place community safety first.
Controversial neurosurgeon Greg Mallam has been terminated from working at a Melbourne private hospital following a Four Corners investigation into his behaviour in the workplace with colleagues and patients. Reporter Louise Milligan broke the story.
Ramsay Healthcare is the nation's largest public hospital provider, and its CEO wrote to all staff today to say that it was terminating Greg Mallam's temporary credentialing to operate at Melbourne's Warringal Private Hospital. The CEO wrote in the email that the allegations are serious and do not align with Ramsay's values. Now, our story was prompted just before the last election. Greg Mallam was seen in a video tearing down a campaign corps flute belonging to Teal MP Monique Ryan and saying that he wanted to bury the body under concrete. We started looking into his past and found multiple allegations by staff and former patients talking about unprofessional behaviour, sexist behaviour, patients saying that he lacked care and compassion even after they'd had terrible outcomes. We have not had any answers to any of our questions to Greg Mallam before the story and indeed today.
Coming up on 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson, more on Ailey France, the woman who defeated Peter Dutton.
That experience after I lost my leg, it drove me into politics. Well, nobody expected that we would even be in with a chance with winning Dixon. I just took that in and just went, yeah, nah, I'm just going to have a crack at it.
Also, the Greens under pressure with one of their co-founders expelled from the party. I'll speak to him and federal leader Larissa Waters.
Figures from crisis service Kids Helpline show children as young as 10 are experiencing serious mental health distress because of bullying at school. The rates of school bullying have reached devastating new peaks in Australia and are now higher than the worst days of the COVID pandemic.
Charlie Ford was just 10 when kids first began using school messaging apps to bully her. In high school, her mother overheard kids on the phone urging her to self-harm.
Her mental health went where no child's mental health should ever have to go to.
I'd be hearing things from people and that would just make me break down in tears.
But Mum Serena says her school's responses over time was slow and ineffective.
They just kept putting it on Charlie as she's the problem, she needs to be more resilient.
Kids Helpline figures show children as young as 10 are having suicidal thoughts over school bullying, and rates have risen higher than at the peak of COVID. While thoughts don't typically turn into plans, they're a key indicator of mental health.
We are really seeing over the last 5 years significant growth in the level of distress, and it's actually higher levels of distress if we get to our younger children.
It comes as a landmark study finds 1 in 4 adults were bullied at school, and rates are not improving. People were most commonly bullied for their height and weight, followed by race, disability, sexuality and gender.
Bullying is associated with
significant mental health harms. Those mental health harms happen not only just during childhood when the bullying is happening concurrently, but they tend to follow people into adulthood as well.
The federal government has launched an anti-bullying rapid review to help drive national solutions.
We've been tasked with putting together potential models for what a consistent national standard could look like to respond to bullying in schools.
Charlie sought help and is now enrolled in distance education, and she's speaking out to drive change. Alison Brownlee, ABC News.
Kids Helpline offers free, confidential counselling for young people aged 5 to 25. You can call 1800 55 1800 or visit their website on the screen there. For a long time, demand for electricity in Australia increased year in, year out as the economy and population grew. But 16 years ago, that link was broken and demand for power went nowhere or even fell. Now, electricity use is at record highs again, and some experts are worried we may be unprepared for the scale and pace of demand that's coming.
Inside this Port Melbourne data centre, Alex Coates can barely be heard over the din. Air conditioning that runs around the clock to keep the servers cool, and the data of thousands of Australians safe is overwhelmingly loud.
And then you can see here just the kind of stack that we're looking at.
Alex Coates says demand for data services is booming, driven by two forces.
First is, since COVID-19, we have seen this radical digitisation of citizen experiences. And then if you consider the second force, which is, of course, artificial intelligence or AI.
There are about 200 data centres in Australia, using around 5% of electricity supply from the grid, and that number is expected to nearly double by 2030. Rapid growth in the number of data centres will come with an explosion in demand for electricity to power them.
And so this notion of the data that sits behind these two driving forces, we haven't seen anything like the demand that we will see over this coming period in what that means.
After 16 years of flatlining, electricity demand reached new highs last year. Experts say there are a few reasons for the uptick, including the electrification of things like transport, and our insatiable need for data could further accelerate demand for power.
So our expectation is that the demand forecasts will be exceeded enormously, and it's a real issue for the economy.
Authorities insist they are keeping a close eye on data centre demand, but they note industry plans are often more bullish than reality allows, and say demand centres will be just one area where demand grows.
But it is something that we are very focused on making sure that we are well positioned to support.
Operators say Australia should look to the US, where demand has caught most observers by surprise.
It's just so quick. The level of technological advancement is so quick that we are going to have to work really hard to get ahead of the wave.
A virtual challenge for Australia's climate targets. Daniel Mercer, ABC News.
Ukraine and Russia have agreed to sit down for peace talks in Turkey on Wednesday, weeks after earlier negotiations stalled. Overnight, Moscow launched one of its largest aerial attacks on Kyiv, killing at least 2 and injuring 15 others. The attack came just hours before high-level talks between NATO allies to discuss military support for Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky is pleading for more weapons and resources to increase his country's production output to help fight the war. Fears are mounting that Russia is executing a new non-military strategy to take over the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. The ruling Georgian Dream government won office in elections many say were rigged and has passed a raft of anti-democratic laws. Stephanie March travelled to Georgia's capital Tbilisi and witnessed this democracy crumbling in real time.
Outside Georgia's parliament, anti-government protesters dodge facial recognition cameras, risking fines of more than $2,000. For some, the price of resistance can be even higher. Elected opposition MP Zurab Japaridze is facing jail for refusing to appear at a parliamentary inquiry.
I had the feeling that sooner or later we will get there when they will start arresting politicians.
He's in no doubt where the blame lies for Georgia's anti-democratic tilt.
It's Russia, definitely. It's Russia's playbook.
The ruling Georgian Dream Party was founded on a pro-EU platform by a billionaire oligarch who made his money in Russia. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Georgian Dream took an extraordinary about-face, refusing to sanction Moscow, passing anti-democratic laws and blowing up efforts towards EU membership. The former president, ousted after the disputed election, says Moscow is using Georgia to experiment with a new strategy to take over a country without firing a shot.
That is something that if it works here to the end, if it's completely successful, it can be applied anywhere.
Georgian Dream rejects any suggestion Russia is pulling the strings.
This question is not a serious one because it's part of a kind of propaganda.
The day after we met Zurab Japaridze at the protest, he became the first of 8 opposition politicians to be jailed in just 2 weeks.
This is what the sharp end of living in an increasingly authoritarian country looks like. They've come for the queer community, they've come for NGOs, they've come for the media, and they've come for elected politicians.
Stephanie March, ABC News, Tbilisi.
To Finance Now, here's Alan Kohler.
Commonwealth Bank share price has fallen more than 10% since its peak a month ago, which qualifies as a correction. And the bank index is down 5%. Now, as I said last night, they are expensive. Less so now than they were, but not cheap yet. Today's quite chunky falls by the banks were offset by CSL and the miners, so the market as a whole went sideways. There was more interest than usual in today's RBA minutes because there were 3 dissenters from the decision to leave rates on hold this month. Here's what the minutes said about that. The dissenters placed more weight on downside risks to the economic outlook, which is pretty much a statement of the bleeding obvious. But the rest of the minutes suggest they were more right than the other 6, so it looks like being a unanimous cut in August. Now, the RBA's own estimate of the neutral rate, which neither stimulates nor contracts the economy, is less than 3%, which means the current cash rate of 3.85% is very restrictive. And even if it is cut 1% this year, which is twice more, borrowing capacity to buy a house will still be 10% below the actual price of houses. On global markets, the US was up a bit. Asia markets were all over the place. The iron ore price jumped another 2.7% last night while oil fell again, and the Aussie dollar stayed just about 65 US cents. Australian meat exports to the United States are about to pass Canada's for the first time in a decade. The shift began with Canada's drought, which cut its cattle herd to the lowest since 1987. And it'll continue because of the 35% tariff that President Trump says will apply to imports from Canada next month, which is more than Australia's 10%. And that's finance.
To sport, and one of Carlton's most inspirational players, Sam Docherty, has called time on his career. The 31-year-old will play his 184th and final game on Thursday night, determined to go out on his own terms and with one of the most resilient stories in football.
Sam Docherty is a boyhood blue who's overcome plenty of adversity.
I've loved every moment of it, to be honest. It's the journey's been tough, but ultimately I leave the game in such a happy spot.
The 31-year-old admitting he knew this would be his final season, but calling time wasn't an easy decision.
It wasn't one specific moment, but there's been times where I've been sitting in meetings going, what am I still doing here at times?
A 2016 club best and fairest and all-Australian, Docherty was a tough player, but off-field was perhaps his most storied journey.
They say tough times don't last, but tough people do.
3 knee recos, a couple of cancer surgeries, chemo and another 16-odd surgeries across 14 years. It's been a tough road.
The 31-year-old leaves behind a lasting legacy, but not before one final match against the Hawks on Thursday, and the Blues will honour him at their next home match on August 9th.
I feel like I got so much more out of my career than I ever thought was possible.
While one great departs, another is locking in. Bulldog star Marcus Bontempelli has finally signed on until the end of 2029.
For me, it was really just about getting to the right time where I could really focus on it, and that's really why it took a little bit.
The captain was named as the second greatest Bulldog ever, behind Ted Whitten, honoured last night at the club's centenary gala. 5 rounds to go, but already Bombers coach Brad Scott has an eye to the off-season, encouraging the AFL to revisit the need for a sub.
It creates all sorts of problems for structure and balance of teams.
The Bombers coach fears it's ruining the future of ruckman.
We're very, very quickly breeding the knick-knack nui type of ruckman out of our game because, you can't jump at centre bounces anymore.
And Saturday's Q clash just got a little bit harder for the Suns. Defender Daniel Rioli ruled out for several weeks after fracturing his fibula against the Crows. Alexia Pesce, ABC News.
Every weekend, thousands of Victorians take to the field to play suburban or country football. It can be tough and uncompromising and brings with it the risk of concussion. But there's only one concussion clinic outside Melbourne and Geelong.
For Jeremy Rohde, the impacts of concussion in community football are raw.
I started experiencing nausea, sensitivity to light. I was in a fog some days when, I'd be at work and I don't remember the last hour of work. It's quite scary.
The 24-year-old has already suffered 6 concussions while playing football across the state, including one last year resulting in weeks of severe symptoms and appointments with doctors in Melbourne.
The doctor told me I'm walking a fine line. If you get hit again, then you might be considering retirement and being medically retired. So that's something I live with.
But for the thousands of Victorians who play bush footy every weekend, help is harder to find. Dan Hamilton recently opened a new concussion clinic dedicated to rehab in Bendigo, but it's the only specialist clinic outside of Melbourne or Geelong.
People are probably travelling between 100 and 200 kilometres. We're open 2.5 days a week and we're booked out.
Many physios and osteos and doctors don't really know what to do.
The AFL is facing a class action from former players as more stories emerge of the often tragic consequences of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But while it's raised the alarm about concussion at the elite level, it remains a grey area in community football.
The AFL advises clubs and leagues to use the HeadCheck app, which is a collaboration between the Murdoch Children's Research Institute and concussion experts. It assists with concussion identification, management and recovery.
But Alan Pearce isn't convinced about the approach.
What clubs really should be doing is more than just relying on an app in order to be able to make sure that their players are properly assessed.
Emil Pavlich, ABC News, Bendigo.
Now with the weather, here's Adam Morgan.
Good evening, Tam. What a wild day of weather we've had. Definitely one to stay indoors. It all started with overnight showers through the Wimmera and Mallee, where most spots got a couple of millimetres as northerly winds picked up. Throughout the day, showers extended east and tended to rain. There was even a rumble of thunder at times. North of the Divide did best. Bendigo, 13 millimetres and Heathcote, 22. In the northeast, Bright picked up 28 millimetres. But today wasn't just about rain, it was the gusty winds as well. Above 90 kilometres per hour in the southwest. And at Mount Hotham, a gust of 150 kilometres per hour this morning. This evening, a severe weather warning continues for damaging winds in these yellow areas, but they should ease later tonight. Last night was mild in the wind. Lows were mostly between 7 and 10 degrees. Today's highs ranged from low to mid-teens in the west to 20.3 degrees at Orbost in the east. Around Melbourne, winds gusted near 80 kilometres per hour as showers developed this morning. Those showers turned to rain and then cleared after 3 p.m. with late sunshine to end the day. In the city, 4 millimetres with a little bit more in the northern suburbs. Today's high of 17 was before sunrise in the wind. From there, it got colder all day, and at lunchtime it was just 12. On satellite, here's the low pressure system that brought today's weather. It's entering Bass Strait tonight. The cold front clears east overnight, but the chilliest air moves in tomorrow, even as conditions start to improve. Tomorrow night, our attention turns west to that strong change. That's our next weather system, and it develops further on Thursday. Rain reaches our northwest late on Friday, and we're still on track for useful falls across northern Victoria into Saturday, with scattered showers hanging around into Sunday. But around the country tomorrow, showers for Brisbane and showers easing in Adelaide. Perth, showers and a possible storm. Back home, and tomorrow is better overall, but there's a few lingering showers, mainly across the south and in the northeast. It's cold enough for small hail at times and snow down to 1,000 metres. Winds 10 moderate west to northwesterly. Ballarat just 9 degrees tomorrow, Ararat 11, Hamilton 12, partly cloudy up in the Mallee, 16 at Oyen. In Wangaratta and Wodonga, 11 degrees with a few afternoon showers. It's mostly sunny in East Gippsland though, Malakuta 16. For Melbourne, cloud increasing with a shower or two developing and potentially cold enough for small hail. In the city, a low of 7, a high of 13 in a moderate northwesterly. Thursday is still the pick. Lovely and mostly sunny, 16. Friday is cloudy and dry, 14. Then evening showers developing. Saturday, showers and breezy, 14. Sunday, a few more showers, 14. Tam.
Thanks so much, Adam. That's it for this evening's bulletin. Stay with us now for 7:30.